you want to boycott the one player, looking right at you, Angel Reese and Asia Wilson, one player that has caused the revenue to go way up in the monetary values. That's what you want to do.
I understand. This is a very, very small minority. It is a very small minority of people, but it is a loud, vocal minority. And this is not the general public. This is not the general population.
It's happening, and nobody can stop it. The WNBA, once seen as an underwatched corner of the sports world, suddenly finds itself in the middle of a raging spotlight. Attendance is spiking. ESPN and other major networks are doubling down on airtime, and debates about a single rookie sensation have captured the internet's attention. But behind all the hype, there's a brewing conflict. A small but vocal group of old guard fans and certain players are furious over the extra attention showered on Caitlyn Clark, the league's brightest new star. Why is one player igniting so much praise and so much anger at the same time? And why are some people pushing a boycott against the very thing they once claimed to want? More eyes on women's basketball. For much of its history, the WNBA existed in a quieter corner of the sports world. The league had devoted fans, of course, loyal supporters who tuned into any available broadcast, even when coverage was scarce. But from a broader perspective, women's basketball struggled to compete with the NBA's colossal viewership and marketing machine. Game attendance hovered at modest numbers, television slots were often relegated to off-peak hours, and many people, fairly or not, believe that women's basketball just couldn't capture a mainstream audience. Yet, through the commitment of players, coaches, and passionate viewers, the WNBA kept its flame alive. Championships were fought fiercely, dynamic stars emerged, and a dedicated core of fans held out hope that the league would one day break through into the mainstream. Then, in what felt like a blink, everything changed. A sensational young athlete named Caitlyn Clark started shattering assumptions and rewriting expectations. She brought a brand of fiery energy that drew in not just the old faithful, but wave after wave of new fans from across the sports spectrum. A shift was happening. It was so strong that networks began revamping their schedules to feature more women's basketball than ever. For the league, this surge should be a moment of triumph. You'd think fans would celebrate these bigger audiences and more lucrative endorsement deals. But as with any growing phenomenon, there's a catch. This newfound popularity has sparked a rift between those who are thrilled about the league's mainstream arrival and those who aren't so sure they want to share their once intimate space with millions of outsiders. The name on everyone's lips is Caitlyn Clark. If you've even glanced at sports media this year, you've heard it, and probably more than once. Her rise to stardom began in college, where she broke record after record and showcased a flair for the dramatic rarely seen in women's basketball. From draining three-pointers with ease to orchestrating her offense with the confidence of a seasoned pro, her game was both dynamic and infectious. The more Clark excelled, the more cameras followed. It wasn't just that she was outstanding on the court, it was the way she carried herself, bold, charismatic, and unafraid to soak up the pressure. Whether it was a buzzer beater or a post-game interview, she had that intangible it factor that turns casual viewers into superfans. Soon, her name was trending beyond sports blogs. Mainstream news outlets started picking up on the story, and social media couldn't get enough of her highlight reels. This mania didn't stop when she transitioned to professional play. If anything, it intensified. Networks and sponsors recognized that Caitlyn Clark was a golden ticket, someone who could finally push the WNBA into territory it had never fully occupied before. The national sports conversation alongside the NBA, NFL, and MLB. Suddenly, the Indiana Fever's schedule wasn't just filled with routine matchups. It featured marquee events that had the potential to draw viewers in the millions. And so the phenomenon took shape. Caitlyn Clark's popularity soared, the WNBA's attendance skyrocketed, and ESPN kept adding game slots because the demand was there. It felt like women's basketball was becoming a cultural force in real time. Yet along with this dramatic evolution came ripples of discontent from some who felt overshadowed, replaced, or simply annoyed that their league was suddenly identified with this particular athlete above all others. Every fandom has its devoted purists, people who stuck around before the big stars, before the viral highlights, and before mainstream coverage was even on the table. These fans feel a personal sense of ownership over their beloved team or league. After all, they were the ones who supported it in the lean years, buying tickets when the seats were half empty and sporting merchandise that no one else recognized. In the WNBA, these legacy supporters once dreamed of the day that women's basketball would be talked about on every major sports show. But now that it's happening, some find themselves at odds with the spotlight. Strange as it sounds, they feel that the league's newfound popularity isn't lifting up all players equally. Worse, they worry that the conversation is becoming hyper-focused on a single star, Caitlyn Clark, at the expense of veterans who have put in work for years. Scrolling through social media, you'll find frustrated fans calling out networks for scheduling too many Fever games or complaining that other players don't get the same media push. Some argue that the league is betraying its roots by funneling so much attention toward one person, while others fear that the WNBA is selling its soul for ratings instead of nurturing talent across the board. Dig deeper, and you uncover an undercurrent of resentment toward the brand new audience that's arrived, seemingly overnight, just to watch Clark. Fake fans, some call them, implying they know nothing about women's basketball history or the longtime stars who paved the way. Though these critics remain a minority, they're incredibly loud, and their message spreads like wildfire in online circles. If you've been around the internet these past few weeks, you've probably encountered the rumor. Certain WNBA fans and even a few insider voices have floated the idea of boycotting Indiana Fever games, particularly those featuring Caitlyn Clark. On the surface, it sounds absurd. Why would anyone who loves the WNBA actively discourage people from watching it? According to the boycott advocates, it's a grand statement against what they see as unfair favoritism. They claim that by artificially boosting Clark's coverage, networks and league officials are giving established stars the cold shoulder. By refusing to tune in, these activists believe they'll send a message that the WNBA must share airtime more evenly. But critics of the boycott say it's not only misguided, it's detrimental to the league as a whole. Lower viewership doesn't just punish Clark. It hurts every player's potential earnings, every franchise's bottom line, and every future broadcast deal. And then there's the practicality of it. A small group of legacy fans can't realistically offset the millions of new eyeballs drawn by a talent as magnetic as Clark. Still, the fact that this boycott talk exists at all highlights a schism in the fan base. On one side, you have a wave of newcomers galvanized by Clark's brilliance, boosting the entire league's profile. On the other, a subset of longtime fans bristle at what they perceive as an invasion of their treasured, tight-knit community, one that grew out of years of niche support for underappreciated athletes. The drama isn't limited to fans. Some of the tension has spilled over to the players themselves, with rumored murmurs, cryptic tweets, and subtle interviews suggesting annoyance, if not outright resentment. Among those catching the spotlight is A'ja Wilson, a formidable talent and important figure in women's basketball. Reports and gossip-laden social media threads suggest that Wilson and a few of her peers are frustrated with Clark seemingly monopolizing the narrative. At times, the conversation takes on a racial dimension. Certain voices argue that black players like Wilson spent years fighting for recognition, only to be overshadowed the moment a white player entered the scene and brought mainstream attention. It's a complex, sensitive topic that stirs up emotions on every side. Some insist it's purely about skill and marketability, while others see deeper, systemic biases at play. Wilson herself is widely celebrated for her achievements, but the rumor mill keeps suggesting she feels overshadowed. In cryptic social media posts, she's alluded to a lack of respect for black women's achievements. While she hasn't outright named Clark, her timing and tone leave fans speculating whether she believes this new wave of coverage is racially skewed. Regardless of how you interpret Wilson's stance, the bigger narrative emerges. We have a star who enjoyed the limelight for years, confronted now by an up-and-coming sensation. Public loyalty becomes divided, and the conversation evolves into something larger than the sport. The WNBA's push toward national relevance is happening at the intersection of race, media influence, and personal ambition, a trifecta guaranteed to incite heated debates. To truly grasp why a boycott is such a risky proposition, look no further than the league's bottom line. Money in professional sports doesn't just materialize from thin air. It's the direct result of media rights, sponsorship deals, and merchandise sales. The bigger the audience, the larger the contracts become. And when networks sign lucrative deals to broadcast games, that revenue flows into the league's pockets, which then funnels down to the players through salary caps and bonuses. In other words, it's a rising tide lifts all boats scenario. If Caitlyn Clark's presence is drawing 1 million extra viewers, those extra eyes translate into bigger checks for everyone. The Indiana Fever aren't the only ones benefiting when their games are broadcast nationwide. The entire WNBA stands to gain. More brand endorsements, more advertisers wanting a piece of the action, more commercial slots during high-profile matches. This all feeds into a brighter financial future for every team and every athlete.
It's just mad. And what they have now trying to do is they are trying to boycott Indiana Fever games. I'm not joking when I say this. They are literally saying, boycott Indiana. We need to all boycott the Indiana Fever games so they don't get more national TV games.
Critics of the boycott stress that blocking or sabotaging one player's viewership is akin to tearing down the very foundation on which the league's growth stands. They point to the ongoing collective bargaining agreement, CBA negotiations, noting that this is a defining moment for women's basketball. Players have been pushing for higher salaries, better travel conditions, and improved infrastructure. Achieving those goals depends largely on convincing networks and sponsors that investing in the WNBA pays off. In short, the attempt to boycott isn't merely a statement against Clark. It's a statement against the league's chance at financial evolution. You don't have to be a business genius to see the contradiction of demanding better paychecks while undermining the catalyst driving those paychecks upward. Still, the friction persists, fueled by resentment, fears of overshadowing, and for some, a desire to cling to a time when the WNBA felt more exclusive, more like a private club than a mainstream commodity. Have you noticed that when male athletes show confidence, throwing up three-point, look-away shots or taunting opponents, it's usually celebrated? Bold personalities like Steph Curry or Patrick Mahomes become global icons precisely because they're flashy, outspoken, and unstoppable. But in women's sports, the same attitudes often face harsher judgment. Clark, known for her intense, unapologetic style, has been called too cocky or too flashy, as though she's violating some unwritten rule of how women athletes should behave. This points to a deeper cultural double standard. Male stars dominate ESPN headlines with their bravado, yet a female player exuding even a fraction of that swagger gets labeled arrogant. Critics say she's overshadowing her peers. Fans of other players accuse her of hogging the spotlight. But as soon as these same critics talk about wanting bigger marketing deals and higher viewer engagement, it's impossible to ignore the contradiction. The league needs star power, but they want that star to be humble, quiet, and possibly less marketable. The controversy swirling around Clark is a microcosm of the challenges female athletes have always faced. To gain mainstream relevance, they often need to exude larger-than-life energy. Yet the moment they do, pushback begins, with some claiming they're not a team player or overhyped. Clark supporters see her as refreshing, a force that's rewriting the script on women's sports. Detractors paint her as a disruption to a status quo that was, in their eyes, working just fine. In the end, it's about more than just one player. It's about how female athletes are perceived, the shifting boundaries of acceptable behavior, and the tension between humility and showmanship. The WNBA is now facing these issues head-on, and the eventual outcome might redefine women's sports culture in a very big way. So where does all this lead us? Right now, the WNBA stands at a tipping point. On one side is a future full of promise, with record-breaking ratings, fresh waves of fans, and the financial clout to finally give these athletes their due. On the other side is a nest of old grievances, jealousies, and insecurities, fueled by some who, ironically, once prayed for more attention on the league. Caitlyn Clark might be the spark that lit the fuse, but the explosion of interest in women's basketball is far bigger than any single athlete. This could be the dawn of a golden era for the WNBA, or it could become a cautionary tale of how infighting and gatekeeping can stunt a league's growth right when it's on the verge of a breakthrough. Every fan has a choice. Either embrace the new attention and use it to uplift all players, or cling to the past and resist the wave that's propelling the sport to unprecedented heights. Every player has the same dilemma. Celebrate the success of a new star who could elevate the entire league, or resent the spotlight she's commandeered. And every sponsor and media outlet is paying very close attention to how this drama unfolds, deciding whether to write bigger checks or walk away from the table.
I don't think they understand there's no viewership before Clark. So if they boycott, would it really move the needle?
In the end, the question isn't whether Caitlyn Clark deserves 41 nationally televised games. The question is whether women's basketball will seize this moment in the national conversation or allow internal squabbles to undermine it. Real fans, those who genuinely love the game, want to see the league thrive. The path to higher wages, expanded rosters, and larger followings is right in front of them. Will they step forward? Or will they sabotage their own future out of fear that one superstar is outshining the rest? Where do you stand on this controversy? Do you think the WNBA should embrace the Caitlyn Clark phenomenon wholeheartedly, or try to balance the spotlight among established stars and rising talents? Drop your thoughts below, and let's keep the conversation going. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. And if you want a deeper dive into more of the stories shaping the world of sports, check out the next video on your screen. We'll see you there, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.